Part 3. In part 2 the Nissan did start in the end, and I then looked at the EGR and brakes. Part 2 ended with me and a pressure washer with a torch underneath the wheel arch of my car, getting every little bit of mud out. So step 19 is we can now refit the new handbrake parts. So the car parts arrives. Now the cables were £32 each, a set of springs is £8, and a set of 4 shoes is only £20. I accidentally ordered 2 lots thinking there was only 2 shoes in a box, so I paid £40. Now ironically, I'm going to mention here, the CarPartsInMotion asked me to return 1 box, and which I did, and then they refunded me the whole amount of £40, giving me a set of shoes for free. I mean, talk about customer service. But anyway, we can now crack on with this and hopefully get this sorted. So if we take a closer look at the brake shoes in the hub, and I'll stop and freeze it here so you can see the adjuster assembly and the handbrake shoes. And on the top we can see the handbrake toggle lever with the handbrake cable. So now with the new brake shoes in place, just go over that with some brake cleaner, because there'll always be a bit of grease on there from when you're working on it, especially with the copper grease. So what we then need to do is adjust the adjuster so that the shoes are very close, but not so close that they're going to drag and actually wear themselves out. So there's a little toothed adjuster down there, and you can wind the brake shoes out. So you're just trying to feel for that drag, and then there is a little hole there, so once we actually get it to where we think it's correct, mostly, we can then just pop the screwdriver through the hole for the final adjustments. But here I'm just trying to get sort of a rough adjustment done. There we go, so we've got a bit of drag there now, so that'll probably do for the moment. You can hear it just dragging. Okay. There seems to be a quirk with these Nissan X Trails and their handbrakes. So I thought this was the end of the matter. The handbrake was strong, about 4 clicks, everything was fine. Apart from when I took it for a test drive, had the car facing downhill, and it was only 4 clicks, handbrake comes up, but if the vehicle moves at all forward through the momentum all the way to the vehicle, the handbrake effectively comes off, and then the handle will actually go up like 8 clicks. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. Perhaps I haven't adjusted these close enough to the inside of the drums. So again, I'm here trying to make sure that these shoes are right next to the inside of the drums, as you can see. So this is showing you how you would do it by using a little torch there. So I'm trying to make sure this is really tight this time. So back out with the torque wrench, tighten all the wheel nuts back up again, and again I hoped this was the end of the matter, but it wasn't. It does seem to be a quirk with the Nissan. Step 20. Replace the radiator mounting rubbers. So I did notice while I was doing that turbo, and that's to take the radiator out, that these 2 rubber mounts at the top had actually sort of fallen apart, and the centre part of them had come away from the outside, which then meant the radiator was bouncing all over the place. So if you're going to do a bit of off-roading, that radiator could start moving quite badly, and the next minute you'll probably have a fractured radiator or something and coolant coming out. So for the sake of, what was it, I think £7.25 each off eBay, you can buy these 2 replacement mounts. So you pop them back in I think it's a 10mm socket. So that's the left side done, then the right side. So I feel a little bit more comfortable with that now. Because obviously I'm the type of guy that's going to do a lot of heavy off-roading, and I need to know that radiator's secure. Actually, I don't do any off-roading. I'd like to. Always worried about breaking down out in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, so that's that back on. Pop the nut back in. And another job done. Okay, we'll just check the radiator now. See, tight as a drum that. Revisit step 19 again. I'm not happy with handbrake. So I just wasn't happy with this handbrake. I'd had a look at this several times now. So what it seems to be is that the shoes are very narrow. Now, if the handbrake is on, the vehicle was to roll forward slightly, it seems to be enough to overcome the retaining spring pressure, and the shoes will sort of fold away, and then the handbrake sort of comes off and the lever will go up. So this seems to be, really they should have made the shoes wider, I think. This would explain why the old shoes were worn at an angle. But yeah, it seems to be they can fold. Those retaining springs aren't going to hold those shoes completely perpendicular to the inside of the drum. But anyway, so she holds facing uphill, but I certainly won't park her facing downhill. It's just too risky. I'm actually going to keep a set of chocks in the car just for this. Demonstration of handbrake in operation. So this is what I think's happening. Put the handbrake on, the shoes expand. If the vehicle rolls forward at all, these shoes can then move forward like this. And by doing that, the brake effectively comes off. And as you tighten the handbrake even more, it just pulls the shoes closer together. Step 21, repair the key fob. So one of the disappointing things with this key was that the actual fob didn't work. As you can see, one of the buttons has been pressed and mashed to pieces. So these are the two micro switches that we need to change. So it's just a case of opening up our fob here, removing the two old micro switches and putting the two new ones on. Now it did need a little bit of tinkering, and I did actually have to use a Dremel to adjust the housing slightly because the battery connector wouldn't fit in and I didn't want to break it trying to push it in. So with that out of the way, we can get on now with the actual circuit boards. Now this actual kit is actually very good value for money. It's only £3.95 delivered, and it comes with the two switches and also a CR2025 battery. So really you just can't complain for that. So we're getting the old switch off here. It is a bit of a tweezer job, this. Like I say, I used a magnifying glass. As you get older, your eyes can't quite see these little micro switches. Things get a lot harder. So we've just got to put all that back together now and go outside, and hopefully it's going to work. And it looks like it does. Fantastic. That would make life easier. Step 22. The fuel gauge is all over the place. Now I know there's 3/4 of a tank of diesel in this. Now notice the trip reading there. I've reset it and it's now 3.7 miles. And according to this, red light's on and we got no fuel. Okay, I've been for a drive now. We're reading 8.5 miles and we've got 1/4 of a tank of diesel now. So it's actually gone up a little bit. Actually, my mistake. We've got no fuel at all now. We're going to get the red light come on now. let's remove one of the sender units from the fuel tank. So notice my CO2 fire extinguisher there, just in case she goes runaway again. Hopefully I can catch it this time. So the Nissan X Trail has 2 access points to the fuel tank because it's like a saddle and it sort of goes over the top of the prop shaft. So there we are. So there's 2 sender units. I'm going to blow this off because it's still covered in sand and hair. I obviously don't want any of that going into the fuel tank. So I'm going to lift this one off first because this one also has like a fuel filter on it. So I want to just check this one out. And also there's less pipes going to it. So this is the sub-fuel level sensor. So we just unplug that. Disconnect the fuel line. Now, I did find something quite odd inside this one. Now, I don't know whether it's like a algae or a growth, which I believe can happen because we do add biodiesel to the diesel, which then means it's a bit more hygroscopic and can take on water, and so bacteria can grow in a diesel fuel tank. But once I take this off, you'll see something that almost looks like a slug, like a slimy slug stuck on the filter. Be careful here, you can cut yourself quite nasty on that, the edge there, like I did. Yeah, so have a look at this, it's like a slug. Almost just stuck on the edge there. I mean, I presume that's some sort of growth. So anyway, so here's a photo showing the parts, so you can see the fuel level float there, and the filter screen, and the potentiometer. So we'll get that in now on the bench, and obviously try and remove whatever that growing thing is. So here's the parts. So let's try and remove that. And it feels like a slug. It can't be a slug. I presume that is the growth that can happen in diesel fuel now. Apparently, adding the biodiesel, which is hygroscopic, so it takes on water, is now a leading cause of issues with diesel engines running, because obviously it can clog the injectors and stuff like that, and also apparently it can lead to black smoke at startup, because the fuel can't combust as completely as it would normally because of obviously the contamination in the fuel. So I think it is a bit of an issue now with diesel, and technically I presume I should probably empty that tank, clean everything through, and put fresh fuel in. I mean, there's talk that the microbes actually produce like an acidic byproduct that can increase corrosion and premature wear of the rings and cylinder liners and such. So it seems to be quite a serious issue now for diesel. But anyway, back to this. We'll remove this, and underneath we should see the potentiometer, and there's the wiper arm connected to the float, which gives us our calibration of the fuel gauge. So hopefully, if I was to give that a clean, then I may get my fuel gauge back again. I'm going to go on the assumption that maybe some of those microbes are sat there and have put a coating over that, and so giving me a bad connection. So we'll give that a little clean now. And fingers crossed that does the trick. So also note that the filter is like on a spring. So it's sort of presumably to make sure that it actually sits right on the bottom of the fuel tank. Because if I push this up, I think I'm going to clean that with alcohol. But if I push that up, it's actually like sprung. So that's presumably to make sure that that part actually sits right on the bottom of the fuel tank. And presumably that's the float switch there that is used to trigger the fuel transfer pump, which is located under the car. So I'll just use some alcohol here just to try and brush off this debris. Alcohol shouldn't damage anything because it's quite gentle. Now the odd thing with the Nissan is there's actually a pump underneath the car which they call the fuel transport pump, and when you fill it up the fuel goes into one side, but it actually has a pump that equalises the fuel on like both sides of the saddle, which is quite an odd arrangement. So there is a this system in place of getting the fuel from one side of the tank to the other side of the tank, and that pump underneath can sometimes fail and then obviously give problems because the fuel's stuck in one side. So anyway, we'll get all this back together now, and as you notice there's no audio here because I forgot to switch the microphone on. So it's turned into a silent movie, this little part. The joys of YouTube. You've got to keep alert at all times. So quite frustrating that. Anyway, so mopping up all the diesel there. You certainly don't want that splashing around and being a fire hazard. And then we can pop the access panel back on and connect that wire to the sender unit, pull the grommet through, reclip it all back down, and fingers crossed the gauge will work, because that would be a very simple fix. I don't really want to buy a new sender unit if I can help it. So, time to see if this is going to work. Ignition on, and there we go, nearly 3/4 of a tank of fuel. Fantastic. All working. Step 23. Only the driver's window works. So I've already mended one of the windows, the one behind the driver. As you can see, this one's pretty dodgy, so we'll have this one out as well. It does seem to be the case that all of them have been dodgy apart from the driver's control panel. So we pop all this off using a small screwdriver. Just unclip that. They always tend to be quite fiddly, those electrical connectors. You're never quite sure which way they actually come off. Each manufacturer seems to have a totally different way of doing it. So then the actual switch pops out of the handle, so we can now take that inside and very carefully strip it down. Bearing in mind there is going to be springs in here and possibly ball bearings. So that's the main switch off. So we're very careful now and just pop this part off. And this is where things might start jumping around. There they are, 2 balls, yeah, 2 ball bearings. So we mustn't lose those, otherwise that's the end of this switch. So looking inside, the copper is clearly oxidised. And also when the switches are activated, you do get perhaps a slight arc that can actually cause some damage to the contact points, as you can see there. So we'll use one of those fiberglass pens and we'll just give all this little clean up. They're very effective, these fiberglass pens. The only thing with them is, if you're not careful, you can get the fiberglass in your fingers. So be careful of that point. Once fiberglass gets in your skin, it's a bit of a nuisance to try and get back out. And I'll spray that with some contact cleaner. You can get like a switch lubricant. Get the contacts back in. So one obviously pushes the window up and one pushes it down. This bit's a bit tricky. You've got to get this back on without springs dropping down. So a bit of quick action here. And did we get it? Looks like we have. It's springing backwards and forwards, so hopefully that'll be alright. Okay. Question is though, does it actually work? Let's just get it all back together. Connect it. Moment of truth. Is it going to work? So far, so good. Yep, we'll go with that one. So there is actually the passenger window as well at the front to do. So I might actually include that video as well. And I'll try and use a different camera angle. I'm going to try and show a bit more detail on the last switch. So checking the front passenger, absolutely nothing again. I was quite surprised to actually find that all three windows didn't work at all. So this should be great for the drivers did. The first time I actually found out it wasn't working was when I went to take the dog for a walk and popped the dog into the back of the car, opened the window so that she could have some fresh air, only to find I couldn't shut the window again. So it's going to be a bit difficult then to leave the car unattended while I was walking the dog. So I had to sort of mend that one almost there and then before I could get out and walk the dog. But anyway, this time I'm going to mark the switch because it was a bit confusing as to which way it went back in. It could have gone in either way round. So I think it's prudent to actually give some markings to this. So I'm using a camera angle at the other side, and also I'm going to use the magnifying glass, so hopefully you can see very clearly the contacts. So yeah, you can see on that contact there's like a silver grey area, which is where it's possibly been arcing away and damaging the actual surface of the metal. Because I suppose quite a bit of power actually does get passed on to these electric motors, and that initial switching over will cause a slight spark. So that's looking clean now. Give that a tap and get rid of the fiberglass. Give it a spray with contact cleaner again. Hopefully this will enable the switch to last a little bit longer. Be interesting to see if it lasts much longer. I mean, ultimately a new switch would be better, but we'll see how we get on with this. So very carefully put those balls back in. So those springs seem to stay in that one. The other one they were dropping out of. That's looking good again. It's quite hard to push them in. So if the balls weren't in the correct place, then that switch wouldn't spring back up and down. It would just sit there. So hopefully this is basically the end of repairing this car. I'm going to conclude that hopefully this is now it. That's working. So short of a good test drive, I think all is well now. time for the test drive. Okay, so going through Tregaron, all very quiet this morning at 7 o'clock. Past the church. Okay, left for the mountain road, past the Spar. Okay. On to the mountain road. See what we've got. Whoa. So this, we've got fuel gauges working. Whoa, 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 whoa. Bit of a narrow road, this one. Yeah, the mountain road is somewhat narrow. So apart from a banging at the back, there seems to be like a banging, possibly almost like the exhaust back box perhaps hitting. That turbo might have been a good one. So I did think that perhaps an original second-hand turbo was a safer bet than a possibly dodgy remanufactured one, because you never know the quality, do you? And I think if you drive it carefully and not thrash the hell out of it, then the turbo should last. So what I'll do is probably just go to the telephone box, which is out in the middle of nowhere. Oh, there's nothing coming. Okay, let's see if I put my foot down a bit. See if she'll go up there. Whoa! Bloody hell. She seems to pull. Wow. Seems to have plenty of power. Pleased with this. Very pleased. So it doesn't look like the engine got damaged. So perhaps he did stall it in time and basically no damage happened. Better go slow over here, past somebody's house. A little bit of consideration. Up the hill. Not far now, and then we'll be at that phone box. I've got to be a bit careful here because people, the locals probably drive quite fast and they'll be assuming nobody's on this road. Well, that turbo definitely seems to be pushing the air in there. This is quite a joy to drive this. Like over cattle gig. hopefully we won't lose a camera. Right then, so now we're in the middle of nowhere. The green desert of Wales. We'll watch the sheep. A lot of sheep around there. Nearly at the telephone box. So this is quite a steep hill coming back up here, so nice and remote. She's silent. I do like this. My wife said it was noisy. She said, "Oh, it's a noisy car. That keeps banging and." What the hell's on the road? A little sheep poo. Bloody hell. They do some poo, don't they? So we've got a remote farmhouse just here. Definitely remote. I think the military also come out training here. Go on then, are you going? Go on then. And then your friend's going to probably jump up now and panic. Alright, there's the phone box. Doesn't work. I think BT keeps trying to take the phone box away. It's obviously doesn't work. But it's sort of like an icon to this area. Phone box is quite special. I don't know how far Devil's Staircase is. So that's the phone box. Yeah, the old phone box and post box. So how far is Devil's Staircase? That road goes up to Llyn. That's Llyn there, 11 miles away. This was all shut off with the COVID. I don't know how far Devil's Staircase is. Quite a way out actually. As you can see, pretty remote. I've looked underneath, I can't find it. It's got to be the exhaust. There's nothing else it can be, surely. Oh, it's actually just check that camera's still recording. You never know, dear. It might have turned itself off. Could well have turned itself off, couldn't it? Handbrake's working. All seems to be going well. Right then. a big hill now. Right. See how well she does. She'll be in second gear. I hope to goodness you don't meet something coming down. Whoa, go on. And I could never be a car reviewer. I have no clue really about cars and driving. It's not really my thing. It's only ever a case of just mending them. So I wouldn't really know what was a good car. Always used to just stick with Volvos, Saabs, things like that. Distance. Whoa! What was that? Oh, look at that view, beautiful. We'll go past their house quietly, go into stealth mode. Whoa! Off he goes. What was that? Peregrine Falcon. Whoa, 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 whoa. Didn't start. Move quick. Right, are we clear? Anything? The road is clear. I'm definitely in darkness. Oh, straight. Okay, suspension's good. See, speed never really pays off, does it? We've got 16% gradient. Whoa, 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 whoa. Right, now we're back into civilization. Yeah, clutch is quite heavy. I can't see my wife liking that. But her daughter would. Her daughter loves heavy pedals. She says a heavy pedal's good. Tregaron. Right. Okay. So can I sneak back without anybody seeing the cameras? So there's the Talbot. Named after the dog. Looking quiet. Right, yeah, right. So this is quite steep, so I think he's braked. Something's coming. It's the Hovis man. It's come with the bread for Tregaron. There we go. Stop. Stop. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe.